Hello. Yay. Good evening, everyone. I am so happy to see you all here. We have lots of chairs being taken up by wonderful friends and family who are here to, I'm sure, watch our seniors give their presentations. So tonight, we have an amazing opportunity to hear our senior classes' presentations. This is the last part of their senior project, where they have been working on this for quite a while. Some of them started this a couple years ago, some of them last summer, but they have been putting in a lot of time to bring this presentation to you guys tonight. The senior project it has a few different parts. They have to have a mentor help them. They do a project. Some of our students have written a book. Some of them have done some handiwork. In the past, I think there's been like business things going on. So there's a wide variety of amazing things that our students do for their senior project. They also have the option to do some community-involved events that we might hear about. And they also have to write a huge research paper, so they're really happy to have that part done. And then the portfolios that they put together, and those are on the back table back there. If any of you want to peek at those, it is amazing what they've been able to do. So tonight, with this presentation, this will be it. I'm feeling it for them too. These seniors are amazing. I love them so much. I taught them for their 10th and 11th grade years for English, and 1 year was with history as well. And they definitely have a lot of quirks. They're a very funny group. We've had a lot of laughs. We've had a lot of moments where I would just have to look at them, and they knew it was time to do some work. Let's see here. Okay, well, we have the big finale. This is the culmination of all their hard work. But before we begin, I want to let you all know that in between each speaker, we'll have a short break, about 10 minutes. This gives our judges enough time to finish up what they're filling out for the presenters. And you can definitely use that time to run back to this back table and take part in some of the refreshments. We have coffee, water, some vegetable trays, some yummy snacks to keep you going since we have 5 presenters tonight. Don't forget to silence your cell phones. I would totally forget that myself. Hi, come on in. And if you need to run off to the cry room, that is totally okay. We have a TV in there. This is being live streamed, so you can watch it from in there and not worry about being a distraction to anybody. The bathrooms are also located down the hallway, just through that back entrance. And with that, I think that's all I have. So without much ado, I would like to present to you our first speaker tonight, who is Cole Kistner.
There are a lot of you here tonight. Hi, most of you already know me, but if you don't, my name is Cole Kistner. I'm a senior here at CCA. It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. That is a quote from Albert Einstein, one of the greatest physicists of all time, as we all know. Now, this quote was probably made well over 100 years ago, considering that's when he was alive. And I think it holds a lot more weight today than it did back then. The need for the reorganization of our education system today is more prevalent than ever. Most people today aren't even aware of what their children learn, especially in public schools, let alone how it'll affect their lives later on. When you're growing up, from when you're born till you're 18, that's when you'll be most affected by what you learn. For my senior project, I chose to teach a biblical worldview class to the 8th and 9th graders here at CCA. The goal of this class was to both open my eyes and my students' eyes to how Christians should view this world, and also a little bit about how other religions should view this world. Although the latter was not touched on as much, just as students had questions on it. Before I move on to the actual project, though, I would like to thank a couple people who assisted in the creation and the completion of this project. Mrs. Barclay, my mentor and the principal here at CCA, she was a great help in organizing my class and also helping me schedule it and I don't really know how to put this in words. She was a great helper, not just in helping me teach my class, but also to encourage me to be what she knows I could be and how I could teach my class. Pastor Jeremiah Campos for helping me visualize the purpose I wanted my project to serve, and also for helping me form my curriculum for my senior project. Mrs. Sheldon, the leader of all of the senior projects here at CCA, she was a great help with everything that we had. She organized everything, and I think we got on her nerves a couple times, but we're grateful for her, and I speak for all of us when I say that. And finally, Mrs. Taryn for letting me use her classroom when I needed to. When I was first considering what I wanted to do for my senior project, I knew I wanted it to do with some sort of education. I came up with several ideas, and at the last minute, I came up with this class. Now, after all of our presentations, if you take a look at our portfolios back there, which Mrs. Barclay mentioned, we'd really appreciate it. You'll notice that my original idea for my senior project veered off a little bit of what it was supposed to be, but it allowed me to make more meaning for what I wanted my project to be. After I got a general idea of what I wanted to do for my project, it was time to start my research, one of the most critical processes of my project. All of my research was just internet-based, so it didn't take that much, but it did take a lot of time and effort to sort through all the information there was. I saved a lot of websites, went back through those websites, gathered all the information that I needed off of them, and then after I had everything I needed, I went back and formed a curriculum all by myself from it, which was a little hard. And considering that all of my classes were fairly short, there was nothing else designed for something like this, so I had to make it all by myself. And it was a little bit of a struggle, but it turned out really well in the end. At the time, the plan was for an hour-long class period on Monday and Tuesday, every week for 4 weeks, coming in at 8 classes, but that changed a lot. But nonetheless, I still had a lot of research ahead of me. I discovered and pinpointed many different topics I wanted to talk about, with the main focus being, of course, biblical worldview. During my research, I also made sure to gain a lot of basic knowledge about biblical principles with something as simple as Jesus Christ being the Son of God. It's something everyone knows, but I wanted to dive a little deeper into it too, just so I could make sure that I covered everything that I could when I taught this class. Finally, with all of my research, as I previously stated, I began to culminate it all into a curriculum of sorts. This definitely took some thinking and planning, and in the end I was left with a bit of a mess, but it would work in my favor as I began my class. This would allow me to focus on more specific topics rather than a huge range of broad topics, which would take a lot longer to go over. For my first class, I wanted to make sure my students had an understanding, a basic understanding, of what biblical worldview is and also what truth in the Bible is. While it was hard to make the students focus on what I was teaching at times, it was also hard for me to even comprehend what I was trying to say. I would say something, look at the students, they'd have a confused look on their faces, and then I'd stand there going, what the heck did I just say? So I sympathize with the students a lot, and that also made me sympathize with a lot of teachers. In total, I only had 4 students, which I used to my advantage by encouraging them to ask more questions and to be more involved in my class. They had a lot more questions than I thought they would, and they were a lot more involved than I thought they would be. For the second day, it was a little rougher than the first day. I had all of this content that I had gathered from my research, but I really didn't have a secure way of sorting it into the days that I wanted my classes to be on. But it ended up working out. On the first day, one of my students had asked me if we could talk about Catholicism and truth in the Bible. Catholicism and the biblical effects it has. Although I had a lot more content than the previous day, like I said, I was still a lot more unorganized. But as I also stated, everything went fine, and I was able to get across to every point I wanted to touch on. The students communicated questions better and distracted each other a lot less. Now, for the third day, things got kind of complicated. After the second day, I had become sick, and Thanksgiving break was approaching, and so also was the due dates for our projects to be completed by. So I had to wrap up everything that I had planned 8 classes for in just one last class. So really, I only taught 3 classes, and I had all of this content that I had to go through. So considering this, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to summarize everything and wrap it up. But I had an idea an hour before the class started. I was looking through a bunch of websites, and I had come across this one which stated 30 reasons why Christianity can be proven false or why it is false. Together with the students, we debunked these arguments, and it was truly inspiring to see the students, with their knowledge of the Bible and their faith, go through these arguments. It also prompted several discussions in biblical theology and some conspiracy theories too, which I am a conspiracy theory nut. I don't believe most of them, but I still think it's really cool to have just some basic knowledge in those. The students interacted a lot more than I thought they were going to, and they were a lot more engaged even after the 2 previous classes. Despite that fact, this day was still one of the best days that I had had, even though I had taught only 3 classes. In the end, this senior project was a deeply humbling experience. I had a great time teaching the classes and having a connection with the students that I wouldn't otherwise have a connection with or even interact with outside of the class. It taught me how to engage a class into what I was trying to teach, and also how to communicate information more effectively. Now, going back to the quote that I presented at the beginning of this, the reason I chose to teach a class like this was to highlight my personal experiences in both public and private schools. I find that in both of these schools, there can still be a sort of restriction on curiosity by these education systems. It is, of course, more prevalent in public schools, but I believe that in both these types of schools, it can still happen. There has to be a focus on the willingness to learn than the forcible application of material by schools. That's why so many kids that graduate from public schools come out of there hardly knowing what they learned. They're forced to learn this rather than understand why they have to learn it. And also, as studies show, as humans grow, their sense of curiosity fades as they become older. It is suppressed at the start of our lives, and this will never change unless our education does. As I wrap up my presentation, I want to read yet another quote from Einstein. "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." Thank you all for coming. Judges, do you have any questions?
So, with a project like this, you spend a lot of time and have many challenges that come in to being able to put it all together. What did you see as your biggest challenge, and how did you overcome that?
honestly, I thought the biggest challenge was going to be to get the students to understand what I was trying to talk about and teach them. But in the end, it didn't end up being as much of a challenge as I thought. And one of the thoughts I had during that was it seemed like they respected me a lot more than I thought they did, and also, even at some points, respected me more than their actual teachers, which I don't want to say that in a prideful position, but it just seemed like that, if that answered your question. Is that it? Okay. Okay.
So explain to me what your curriculum design process looks like.
Oh boy. So like I said, I started out like with a jumbled mess of information. I went through all these websites, pinpointed all this stuff I wanted to highlight, but the design process of the curriculum was a little weird since all I didn't take off any ideas of any other curriculums. I just started this off basically from scratch. And it was hard, and the design process was a little messy, and in the end I didn't really have a solid curriculum because it's just me trying to do this. So, but it worked out well, and it wasn't as much of a struggle as I thought it might be, but it definitely took a lot of time.
Do you see yourself teaching in the future?
No, not at all. I could never do this as a job.
The last thing I want to say, buddy, I'm proud of you. You did an excellent job, and I commend you for your subject matter.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all the judges who came tonight. We really appreciate it.
Hello. There we are. Thank you for waiting, everybody. Looks like our judges are finishing up their notes, which brings me to a wonderful point. I never introduced our judge panel to everybody, so I have to put the spotlight on you guys. I am so sorry. Yes. So tonight we have 4 judges who have graciously volunteered their time here to help our seniors by giving their comments and thoughts on their presentations and their portfolios. So first I'll start here on my right, we have Matt Tucker and Alicia Carl and Paul Derrick. Yes, I remembered. And Mrs. Corey Ward. Sorry, I almost called you Mrs. Ward because the school thing, and yeah, so I messed it up. I'm sorry. So, after that light little note, we have our next presenter, Jacob Taryn, who is totally ready to come out and wow us. So, there we go.
Awesome. Hello, and thank you all for coming here. For those of you, my name is Jacob Taryn, and I'm very excited to be sharing with you all my senior project. Before I begin, however, I would like to say a few thank yous. Oops, forgot to do that. I'd like to say a few thank yous. First, I want to thank Zach Nolan, Amy Oberst, Jeremy Wright, Tim McCormick, Brian Griggs, and Bill Hotwood for help with performances and practices. I also want to thank Chloe Beck for creating the slides that were shown at the concert. I want to thank Jeremiah Campos for allowing the worship band to use the youth group as a time to have a pre-concert. And I want to thank Tom Hughes for being an amazing mentor and helping me through this whole journey. So my reasons for the concert. Worship, as long as I can remember, has been a focus in my life, from singing in the car, in the kitchen, or on a stage. And I've known since about 11 years old that God has placed the love of worship as a main focus. And then from now, recently, I have felt more, a stronger pull towards leading worship as a profession more than just a hobby, I guess. Worship has a huge impact on my life, and because of that impact, I felt like I should be giving back to God through the passion that He gave me. And the best way I could think of doing that was through a concert. So I had a few original prospects. As soon as we got the senior packets that had all the details on what we could and what we couldn't do for a concert, I immediately knew I wanted to do a worship concert, or not concert, for senior projects. I knew originally, excuse me for a second, I knew that I wanted to do a worship concert right off the bat. I had this grandiose idea of 200 plus people coming to a huge venue and all just coming together to worship God. Now, for those of you who know and saw it online, it did not happen that way. It was a struggle to bring to life, but my ever faithful mentor, Mr. Hughes, helped me to make it happen. So now, I need to talk about where it started. Originally, I started with some research, and Mr. Hughes and I were brainstorming what exactly we needed to do to finish up, or to create this whole concert. We had a few main focuses that we wanted to nail down: band members, location, date, and practices. Already, I had the idea of bringing in Zach Nolan on the acoustic guitar and Amy Oberst on the piano, which they happily agreed and was amazing. The drummer took a little bit of time to figure out, but I was able to contact Tim McCormick, and he agreed, along with Jeremy Wright, who was going to play electric guitar. So for the practices, I had to create a short set list, about 8 songs, and we had the first practice, I can't remember off the top of my head when it was, but the first practice was to figure out whether or not what songs we'd be using, what songs we wouldn't be using, what keys, and so just any changes. The next thing that I needed to figure out was when everyone could meet together for a practice, because as anyone who has organized a group of people more than 2 knows, scheduling is a hassle. Sadly, Jeremy had to leave the project due to scheduling issues with himself and not really feeling like he could give these songs enough justice with how little practice he could give in. So next was changes. Panic. A little bit of panic, wondering where I was going to find these members, because I had the idea of someone on the electric guitar, and without that, it just didn't seem, the idea that I had didn't seem right. It was a miracle of God, however, that I remembered that Brian Griggs is an amazing electric guitar player, who I'd done worship with many times before. And then the worship team also decided, we need a bass player. And so I went and talked to Bill Hopkins, asked him if he wanted to join. They both agreed and put in a lot of work to catch up for all the missed practices that they had to catch up for. So next was the location. Location was a little harder to pinpoint. Originally, I wanted to do the venue I wanted was the auditorium at the Emmett City Park, but because I had to do it in cold months, I didn't really want to do it outdoors. So in other words, I had to focus on indoor venues, whittled it down to the Nazarene Church's sanctuary, or CCEs. Because of some complications with contacting the Nazarene Church, I stuck on the CCE sanctuary, which turned out to be one of the best ideas, or not best ideas, but best decisions that I made throughout this. It made it easier for us to set all of the gear up, since we'd been here many times and we're going to be here more. And also because we practiced here, it was a familiar venue. Equipment was used and brought in to help smooth out some extra bumps in the road, such as a drum shield to quiet down the drums a little bit, mainly just for the audience. So we wanted to make it the best audience interaction, I guess, as we could. Next was the date. Finally, now that we had the location, we had everyone else, we had to figure out a date, which was fairly easy. I stuck on Friday, December 3rd. The thing is, though, October flew by in the blink of an eye. There was no time to think. Now, it was November, and I still had to figure out at least 1 or 2 practices where all of us could get together and practice, which we did a week before the concert. It was a good practice, but we realized we needed another practice or 2 before the concert to feel a lot more comfortable with it. And so Zach decided to ask Pastor Jeremiah if we could use the youth group as a practice by doing worship for them. So now it's the pre-concert. My nerves are firing just all over the place. And I was already worried about the main concert, and now there's a surprise concert 3 days from the practice, and so it was sprung up on me all of a sudden. But I was okay with it. God helped to calm my nerves, especially when I got up there and I started singing. My nerves calmed. I gained a lot more focus, and it went smoother than I expected. It went pretty well. And my nervousness was replaced with feelings of excitement, of joy, and of overwhelming peace. It didn't all go perfect, but it didn't matter that much to me at that point. What mattered to me was that everyone there seemed to be having a really good worship session, and that's all I could have asked for. So now it's the actual concert night. Nervousness went down because I had a warm-up session right before, and I had the pre-concert the day before. And the only thing that really got my nerves spiked was the realization that I should probably say something as an opening and ending, and maybe a little bit in between point. Problem was I didn't think about it until the day of, and so there was no rehearsals. But through that, from my perspective, it felt as though I could see God speaking through my ramblings and my mistakes to at least 1 or 2 people that were there. which, by the way, was, I'm pretty sure, about 30 to 40 people, more than I could have asked for. So now, concert prep. The concert was around the corner. Oh, wrong order of my notes. That's awesome. Okay. Preconceived notions. I had some preconceived notions with my concert being this huge deal with many different people showing up. But what I realized while I was singing and afterwards was that the fewer people than I thought I would want to come there, they were there for a reason. God had brought them there for one reason or another. And as soon as I pushed down my own ideas for what I thought it should be, God's ideas and will for what he wanted it to be shone through. And from the stage, it was amazing to see it touch the audience and to almost see God moving throughout the building. After I was done with the concert, I have to admit, I was relieved. I didn't want to be on the stage anymore. I wanted to just be done with it. But at the same time, I felt this amazing joy that I feel only God can give. And I feel with this joy, this is a feeling that I have, that it is a great assurance that you have done the will of God when you are doing or after you have done something that you feel God wants you to do. So what I learned many things throughout this whole journey, such as some basic singing tricks. When you're breathing, just for reference, if you're breathing, breathe through your chest, not your stomach, because if you breathe through your chest, you'll have more air to use. And then when you are actually singing, use your breath to project the words, not your vocal cords, or else you're going to strain your vocal cords. And confidence. Confidence is key in everything that you do, especially singing. It can make you sound better. And then I also learned how to set up a concert, of course. Time management and organization skills, such as fighting down my procrastination and organizing and just setting up, figuring out where people are going to go, dates, where it's going to happen, were all amazing things that I learned how to do firsthand. But the most important thing I'd say I learned was that if you put your heart into what God wants you to do, then he will do amazing things with it. For example, I got a text the morning of December 3rd. It was from a friend who had made it to the pre-concert, letting me know that he couldn't make it to the actual concert. Now, he let me know he's not a fan of worship, and we both knew this, but he said that was one of the best worship sessions, I guess, that he'd ever been to. And he enjoyed worship. And that blew me away. That was more than I could have asked for. I never imagined that a concert that I put on would touch even a single heart like that. And I just think that goes to show that when you put effort and time into what God wants you to do, it can do miraculous things. In the end, again, if you are putting your full self into what God wants you to do, it'll do amazing things. But you must be willing to do work and to follow God's will, because that is what us as Christians should do. And especially if you are trying to grow in your faith. I learned that over these past few months, and it will be a lesson that I will not forget for probably the rest of my life. I loved every bit of setting up and doing and actually performing the concert, and I can definitely see myself doing this again in the future. And I just want to end with a note of thankfulness on the people who helped me set up, helped me perform, and even the audience that showed up. And so from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you. Okay, do the judges have any questions?
But Jake, what did you say is your biggest challenge, and how did you overcome that challenge?
My biggest challenge, I would say the time management, trying to figure out my procrastination and fight against that. That would definitely be my biggest challenge.
You said that you were looking at this as a future career. Could you expand on that just a little bit?
Yes, I can. In fact, I am planning on, and I have been accepted to go to Boise Bible College, and I'm planning on having a degree mainly in youth ministry, but with an emphasis on worship ministry. And so I feel God calling me to be a youth pastor, but also a worship leader.
It's got to be tough to evaluate a good worship conference. So what standards did you use to determine, was this a success?
What standards? I believe this, not I believe. What I believe as the standards for a good worship concert isn't how good you performed, but your impact on the audience. And I felt and I saw a lot of people who seemed to be fully into worship, and that to me was just a good assurance that I was doing the right thing. Okay.
So Jacob, that was really cool, and I actually have a lot of I understand where you've been with this because I've done that a couple of times in my life as well. And so I was curious, what did you learn about yourself as you were preparing and you're like trying to figure out how to overcome procrastination and these other things that happen? What did you learn? Like, what were some takeaways, some tools that you can use next time to help you just prepare with more calm and peace in that?
Tools. Let's see. I'd definitely say get myself motivated sooner than what I did. Get at the chopping block right away. Just get it done. Knock it out. Definitely plan it out a lot more than I did, and actually have due dates for certain things. And then also another thing that mainly helped was this helped me grow in confidence, and confidence was definitely a main thing that by the end of it I could definitely see helped me with it. So, yeah. Again, thank you guys.
Okay, here we are. Number 3. This is very exciting. Okay. I am going to call up Miss Chloe Beck. She is our next presenter. She is probably the most excited. I'm saying that to give her encouragement. Chloe Beck. Woo!
All right, there's kind of a lot of you, but that's okay. Backwards growing knowledge. The more I grow, the less I learn. The more straight the path, the more I turn. As time goes on, the smaller I get. One thing that grows is my regret. Letting go takes part of me away. My very little importance is what seems to stay. I'll never be a wise person, because as my knowledge grows, it also seems to shrink. I start to realize more and more that God is bigger than I think. My backwards growing knowledge makes me wonderfully obsolete, because no matter how old I get, only He can make me complete. I bring nothing to myself but evil, hate, and sin, and even my wisest moments are nothing compared to Him. I'll never be a professor driving a fancy car, but even if I were such a thing, it wouldn't get me far. Where I want to be is somewhere I can't drive. My tiny earthly knowledge is dead, but Christ made me alive. Good evening. My name is Chloe Beck, and thank you all for coming. I'd like to start by thanking my mentors, Dennis Mansfield and Amy Oberst, for all their help and hard work, as well as Hannah Barclay for helping me edit, Jeremiah Campos for helping advise my project, Beth Oberst for designing the cover of my book with me, and all of my sponsors and other people that helped support me and make this project a success. As many of us seniors can agree, senior projects are long and at times confusing. Much like life, life is sometimes confusing. But could you imagine how confusing life would be if all of a sudden people only ever had one facial expression? If there was no contrast in life, if everything was only ever one color, one shape, one way, if there was nothing in the world that was unique. If that were the case, everything would be a mess. You would see someone smiling at a funeral or crying while they buy groceries. You wouldn't be able to tell if someone was happy or hurt. You wouldn't see if someone was broken. It would be so confusing. Yet how often is life like that? How often do we truly express ourselves? How often do we set aside our fears or ideas of normal and be real with people? As I said, my name is Chloe Beck, and my senior project had a little something to do with honesty. For those of you who don't know, I wrote, edited, and self-published my own poetry book. The writing process was done throughout all of high school, but all of the editing, formatting, copywriting, and more was done during this last year. It was a long journey to get to this point, to be able to stand in front of you all and tell you about what I went through in order to get here. And although by the time I'm done, you won't be able to see the full picture, I hope to give you the best understanding I can of what my project looked like. Before I do that, here's a basic list to keep in mind of all the things an author has to do to publish a book. Write, organize, edit, format, cover, ISBN number, research, copyright, and print. These are the main components of publishing a book, which we will look at more closely in a minute, but for now, there's something else I'd like to address. Many people may think a senior project is for your senior year, and I'm sure in most cases they'd be right. However, I am not one of those cases. My senior project did not start when I started senior year. It started in freshman year. That is when I began writing my book and considering using it for my senior project. Fast forwarding to the end of junior year, I started meeting with my first mentor, Dennis Mansfield. We started to plan out the process of editing and formatting my book. Our meetings continued during the summer, but I ended up having to switch mentors due to scheduling and meeting issues. Fortunately, I put our planning to good use by spending my summer organizing my poems and editing them with Jeremiah Campos, Amy Overst, and Hannah Barclay. The joys of editing. Editing took up a lot of my time. I even worked on editing after I got my wisdom teeth out, which was interesting and gives explanation to my lovely photo. Honestly, I think this picture pretty well describes how I felt half of the time editing, which was scared and confused. I edited a lot by myself and then sent a copy to Mrs. Barclay, who then did some edit work. After that, I sent a copy to Jeremiah Campos and Mrs. Overst to look over and make suggestions on my book. Which I used their suggestions to rewrite phrases and reword lines. After that, I sent another copy to Mrs. Barclay after I had considered their suggestions and adjusted. So Mrs. Barclay looked through my book again and then sent it back to me, and then I looked through it a final time before I decided that it was done. Like I said, editing took up a lot of my time. Next to be accomplished was the cover work, which was done by Beth Overst and I. We spent a good couple of days working and adjusting things. It was kind of fun. We got to bounce ideas off each other and laugh at spelling mistakes. Most of them were mine. And ultimately, we got the job done. It was mostly her behind her computer, and then we just messed with the cover until it looked the way we wanted. We had a lovely time practicing patience when we had to change things that we thought we were done with, which happened a lot. There were many times when we thought we were done with something, but formatting and printing proved us wrong. Formatting the book was done by me, although I needed some help. In order to get this help, I needed to look into a publisher. I had tried calling a few different publishing places, some of which suggested that I talk to a printer. So I called a few different printing places, but none of them really got back to me except for one, which was Caxton Printers, which is the one I ended up working with. When working with Caxton, I mostly talked to Steve Aprizio. Just a side note to anyone named Steve, Mrs. Barclay will not remember your name. Just a fact. There were many times when we were meeting where Mrs. Barclay would refer to Steve as Fred or Billy or Carl, but mainly she called him Kevin. Basically, he was called anything but his name, and by the end of it, he had acquired many names. Luckily, Steve was a good sport and was very helpful when it came to formatting my book. I had to make a few changes to page sizes and fonts. Nonetheless, it was pretty simple, just time consuming. Another thing I had to do was buy an ISBN number and barcode. I also had to write the copyright page, which it seemed ironic that for a copyright page, you basically plagiarize someone else's copyright page. After all that was done, I sent PDFs to Caxton Printers, which they turned into a proof. And Tristan Dunbar and I drove to Caldwell, and going to be honest, it was a little scary. We went on some hillbilly back road to get there, and then the freeway in my car, and then we were in a town that looked like a place where you might get mugged. But we survived, and it all went well. The proof looked great. And then a few days later, I got to go back and pay for my books. And then after I paid, 2 days later, I got to go pick them up. And this is what it looks like. So it's very nice. All that was left to do was finish the copyright process, which I had started after I finished editing. I filled out a pre-registration form and paid for the copyright. And then once the book was printed, I filled out a standard application form and sent a PDF of my work to the copyright office for them to process. About a month later, my certification papers came in the mail. When it came to research, I mostly focused on what it really meant to publish a book, as well as research on printing and copywriting. To have something published means that you have made something available to the public. To have something copyrighted means that you have the legal right to your work. Knowing this information was important because it allowed me to know what was legal and what was not when it came to publishing. For instance, I learned about the poor man's copyright, which is something you may have heard of. The poor man's copyright is where you send a copy of your work to yourself in the mail and leave the package unopened so that you have a registered date placed on the package by the postal office. In theory, this proves that the work is yours. Unfortunately, this no longer works because it's not legal. After experiencing firsthand how much it costs to publish a book, I understand the poor man. Now that you know the basics of my project, I'd like to tell you about the last thing I did. This was not part of my original plan. In fact, it was set in motion 2 weeks, before my project was due. However, I personally think it was one of the most important parts of my project. While my book was being printed, I did a poetry reading. This required me to be very open and honest, as if on display, and in doing so, became one of the hardest things I've done, both in my project and in my life. I read some of my poems myself, and I had a few other people that agreed to read selected poems with me. Their pictures are shown on the screen. There were 7 of us, including myself, and those of you who read with me, thank you again. It went fairly well. It took a lot of work, though, a lot of scrambling. However, the days before the poetry reading were very emotional and overwhelming to me because I knew this wasn't just a project or a school assignment. For me, it was a defining moment in my character, in my faith, and in my life. It was something that absolutely terrified me because I knew that this was the moment that decided whether I was going to be willing to be an example, willing to stand and let people criticize me, willing to let the world see my failures and fears just to bring God glory, or if I was going to be a prideful coward for the rest of my life. I decided, in spite of my fears, that I was not going to be a coward, that I wasn't going to let fear or hate stop me. I decided that people could judge me all they want because all that I'm doing is for the Lord. That was one of the most terrifying but absolutely freeing moments of my life. My poetry is very personal, expressive, and unique. It is very real. It is very me. It is a contrast that shows that I'm not always dorky or quiet. In closing, my poetry, my book, and my project became my testimony. I grew a lot spiritually as well as academically, and I learned that even though being honest and real with people is hard and scary, it is worth it. God made us all unique, and we shouldn't be ashamed or scared of that. With that, judges, do you have any questions for me?
Having had a mother that was an author, I know that the mic's not on. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So, as I start out, my mother was an author. I know there are reams and reams and reams and redos and reworks and rewrites of paper. How or what process did you use to determine which of your poems you wanted in your book?
So when I was deciding that, I went through and I already knew some that I wanted to take out. And then I met with Jeremiah Campos and Amy Oberst, and they looked through them too. There were a few that I wanted to take out that they said I shouldn't, so I had to put them back in. But I basically just went off of a gut feeling of, I know I don't really feel comfortable sharing this with the world, or I don't think this is as developed enough, or this doesn't have the best thought process, or it's just not it wasn't a fully formed thought. So I basically took out the ones that I felt I didn't have enough to work with. I took those out and then saved the rest. So.
Do you plan on marketing this, and how do you plan on doing that?
Well, I ordered 75 copies when I printed them from Caxton. The church bought 20 of them, so they've been selling them, and then I've sold a couple or half of them myself. I don't know if I want to sell in a different way yet. I'm not exactly sure what direction I'm going to go with that, but so far it's just been people finding out and then asking me, do you have a copy? And then I'll be like, sure. So.
You did a really good job of talking to this, but I want to flesh it out a little bit more. You kind of ended with this. Whenever you do something creative for yourself and then you realize now other people are going to see it, it's incredibly vulnerable. Mm-hmm. How has your relationship with your writing changed through this process?
When I first started writing, it was kind of a coping mechanism. It helped me to express myself. It helped me have a way that I could get out things that I didn't understand or that were just hard. And that kind of stayed the same, where it was just venting or just hard stuff until junior year. And then I think when I started changing, then so did my writing. So I started writing more because it was fun and I enjoyed it than just to get out hard emotions.
Great job.
Thank you. at all?
I cannot believe how fast we're going through refreshments. You guys came here hungry. Good. Okay, well, we are over halfway through. Thank you for sticking it out. And now that you all know that I don't remember names well and I usually call everyone Kevin, that's fine. That's fine. Just know I probably won't get your name right. Okay, so once everyone gets settled down a little bit, very nice. Our next presenter is Miss Tristan Dunbar. So let's give her a round of applause. Yep.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Tristan, for those of you who don't know that. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who's helped me with my project. A special thank you to my mentor, Mary Wolf. She wasn't able to be here tonight, unfortunately. She helped me through the entire process of my blood drive. I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who donated my blood drive and those of you who just came and sat with me and hung out and helped me wherever you could. And lastly, but most importantly, I want to thank Mrs. Sheldon. She has answered every single question to the best of her abilities, put up with my late work with grace, and she's provided any help that she could offer. So for those of you who may not know me, for the past several years, I've been passionate and fascinated with learning about the human body. And because of this, I knew for my project, I wanted it to be something that would benefit others, but also be medically related. I just wasn't quite sure how or what to do to accomplish this until somebody mentioned the idea of a blood drive, and I was sold on the idea. It was perfect, and it wouldn't just help people, but it could save people's lives, and I myself could save someone's life. So I'm sure most of you, or at least some of you, have heard the term, oh, I've poured my blood, sweat, and tears into my project. And most of the time, this is just a figure of speech. But however, in my case, it's quite literal. Blood, sweat, and many tears have been poured into my project, and I'm excited to share it with you all. So in my opinion, I feel to understand the importance of donating blood, you should understand the basic facts about it. So with that, let's get into it. So there's no substitution for blood. There's no other substance like it. It's made up of three main components: red blood cells, plasma, and platelets, and each of these components plays a role in maintaining homeostasis. And homeostasis refers to the balance of work by all of your parts of your body to maintain and preserve life. So the first main part is your red blood cells. So your blood is obviously red, but have you ever wondered why? This is due to your red blood cells. These blood cells are composed of hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is a protein that carries oxygen. And your red blood cells carries oxygen along with carbon dioxide, carries it to wherever it needs to go to be exhaled and to be used by the parts of your body. And these cells are produced in your bone marrow, and they can live for up to 120 days. So although your blood is red, your plasma is actually yellowish color, as you can see up on the screen. And plasma makes up more than half of your blood volume, and it has one main job, and it's to transport. It transports water, cell waste, enzymes, salts, and it carries these things wherever they need to go. Plasma also helps your body get rid of waste deposited by your cells. The third main part is your platelets. Interesting enough, your platelets have another name, thrombocytes. So you know the little scab your kids are always picking off of for whatever reason? Well, their platelets don't appreciate it very much. Your platelets are responsible for making that scab so that their wound can heal and stop bleeding until they rip it off again. They help prevent severe bleeding, and they only occupy a little bit less than 1% of your blood volume. So although I said that there's three main parts, there's actually a fourth. These are your white blood cells. These cells make up, again, a very, very small percentage of your blood volume, but they're so important. They are in the blood, but they're actually a part of your immune system, and they help your body fight off diseases and infection. So now that we've covered the basics, let's jump into the fun stuff. So hosting this drive, I had to spend a lot of time on the Red Cross website, checking emails, sending emails, checking the schedule, printing off marketing material. all that kind of fun stuff. And while on the website, I found that the Red Cross had lesson plans for like middle schoolers. And I thought it would be so fun. So I jumped into studying their lesson plans, chose what I wanted to teach, and took off with it. But now if you know any of the middle schoolers that go to this school, you can only imagine I was a little stressed. There's 40 plus kids, and they're not the most attentive group. I was worried they wouldn't care or even be interested in learning about it, but I was so wrong. They were oddly super into it. So, funny story about my class. I started off by talking to Mrs. Taryn, the lead middle school teacher, and I asked her what class I could steal from her that would work best. And so she gave me a date, and it was 2 weeks from that Monday that I had asked her on a Thursday. It was during their PE period, so all the kids were extremely excited about missing PE. And on that next Thursday, keep in mind it's still a week before my class was supposed to be taught, she came up to me and asked me if I was prepared and could teach the class that Thursday. And I was like, okay, sure. And I had my lessons planned out, but I had nothing of my supplies I needed for the experiments. So I left at lunch, gathered all of them, and was all the way prepared in less than an hour, surprisingly. But I was glad that I had my lesson plans done before because it made it easier to teach what I wanted to teach right off the bat. So I tried teaching these kids how to recruit people to donate blood. And we did little skits and we did role plays to try to give them practice to do it. And I'm gonna be honest, this part did not go very well. It was oddly violent and super chaotic. And I can say they tried their best, but I'm just glad it was pretend and not for real. I also taught the kids about the different blood groups, and we learned about which ones can and cannot be mixed. We did a little experiment, and the kids had fun with it. They also learned about the components of blood and about each one and the role each one plays. And we talked about diseases that some people suffer from. We read a story about a girl named Gabrielle, and she suffered from sickle cell disease. And we learned about how blood transfusions have helped her live with this disease in a less painful way. And a little information about sickle cell disease: it's an inherited blood disorder. And normally in a healthy body, your red blood cells are a round shape, and they're flexible and they flow through your blood vessels easily. However, in someone suffering from sickle cell disease, your red blood cells are a crescent moon shape. So they're not as flexible and they don't move nicely through your small blood vessels, causing blockage, and as I said, it's really painful. So hosting my blood drive actually went a lot easier than I expected it to be. The first thing I did was I contacted Robin Sebastian. She's an MD who works at Valor Health in town. And then she contacted the lab technician that works there and asked her if she was willing to, because Robin felt she was a better choice for me. But Maggie felt like there was a different person that was a better choice for me, so she gave me Mary's info. And Mary's a Red Cross representative, and she organizes blood drives all the time. I met with her, and she walked me through the process, and she was really informative and helped me learn how to recruit people and found a place for me. And 2 weeks before my blood drive was supposed to happen, all the slots were full. So I was really grateful for that, because I worried about it. I worried about that part. So in my portfolio, if you look in it, you'll find that I wanted to include my experience donating blood. However, I wasn't able to, unfortunately, because apparently if you're short, it's harder to be qualified to give blood. There's a scale the Red Cross uses, and it shows how much you have to weigh according to how tall you are. So the shorter you are, the more you have to weigh, and the less forgiving the scale is because you're smaller. So I weighed 3 pounds under the minimum weight to be able to give blood for someone at 5 foot. But however, since then, I've gained a few pounds, and I'll be able to donate blood on February 2nd at a different blood drive. So like I was, many people are unaware of blood donation and the simple basic facts about it, so I thought I would share some. So there's a list of requirements you have to meet and qualifications that the Red Cross is really good about making sure they're met and it's safe for you to give blood. The human body roughly has 10 pints of blood, and donating blood, you donate about 1 pint. And after blood is donated, the people it's sent to, it can be split into its 3 main components, and this has the potential to save 3 lives. And your blood could be sent anywhere. Like, for example, Jeremiah Campos's blood was sent to Maryland and New Jersey. And the best part of it is you get to help save lives. So the day of my blood drive came, and it went really smooth. The Red Cross team was super informative, and they kept me in the loop the whole time. They gave me things to do, and they were very open to any questions I had and explaining anything I didn't understand. So most everyone who came to my blood drive did really well. They came, donated, ate a snack, and sat down for a while and were able to go about their way. Others did not so great. There was a couple people who had to lay down and allow their body to adjust to the loss of blood. But I'm just thankful there were no serious issues. So even though I wasn't able to donate, I was able to handle registration. And I got to meet everyone who came and thank them for their donation. And my experience doing this and helping lives was really humbling. I've actually gotten a few calls and emails from people thanking me for doing this because they themselves or one of their kids have received life-saving blood transfusions. So after my drive, Leah, she was one of the phlebotomists from Red Cross, she shared with me the results. My goal going into my blood drive was to get 28 units of blood donated. I got 34 units of blood donated, so that has the potential to save 102 lives. This made me so grateful for the opportunity I had to do this and one day donate blood. And the main point of my project was to spread awareness of blood donation and the importance of it. And in doing that, I also got to help save 102 lives. So ending on that good note, I want to say another huge thank you to everyone who's helped me in any way throughout this whole experience. To my audience for being here and listening, and I'll leave you with one thing, is do your part, do what you can, and give the gift of life. Judges, if you have questions.
Yeah, that entire thing made me queasy, but
I thought it might.
yeah, I just kept putting my head between my legs. So, medicine in your future?
Oh, definitely.
And what would that be?
Well, my dream job would be to be a pediatric nurse, but honestly, if I could just help people in any way in the medical field, I would be glad to do it.
What did you find as your biggest obstacles when you were putting together your drive?
Biggest obstacle I feel like would have to be knowing how to ask a person to donate blood in a way that wouldn't scare them or wouldn't drive them away. I really had to learn how to be personal with people about asking them, and with also not being able to donate was really a big obstacle for me to get over.
Nice job.
All right, well, thank you all so much. Have a nice night.
Okay, this is it. Our very last presenter, which I would like to say that we always save the best for last, but they've all been amazing. So this will be an extra special treat. I want to thank you all for sticking with us once again. Very, very happy to present to you Miss Anna Belder.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anna Belder. My senior project was publishing my first novel as both an ebook and a paperback on Amazon. The main reason why I chose to do this as my senior project is because it has always been my dream since I was little to publish a book. Though difficult and time-consuming, I would not change my project if I had to go back, because it accomplished one of my dreams. Dreams aren't dreams because they're easy. They call them dreams for a reason. It's because it takes effort to accomplish them. The completion of this project would not have been possible if it weren't for my wonderful mentor, Janet Monty. She helped me through almost every aspect of the work, which included filling out forms and editing and everything else. We met nearly every week, and we discussed everything and anything that had to do with my project. Her journalism and writing experiences really came in handy many times. Several times when I got discouraged, she stepped in and encouraged me to keep going. When I said that I wanted to give up and quit, she told me not to, because after I had finished the project, she said I would look back and be thankful I hadn't. I'm pretty sure if she hadn't kept encouraging me, that I would have quit before I was done. Some of you are probably wondering what inspired me to write this book. Well, for those of you who know me, when I say that I read anything I could get my hands on, it was literally anything. This included storybooks, the Bible, newspapers, magazines, history books, and even the dictionary. I was desperate for reading material. I had read everything else in the house at least twice. And I did learn some new words that aided me in helping with the writing of my book. One of the first books that I read about the Civil War was War, Terrible War from the History of Us series. It mainly focused on the life of soldiers and the politics that surrounded the war, but I still read it multiple times. This book sparked my interest in history in general, but more specifically in the Civil War. As I continued to read everything in sight, several books grew to become my favorites. The original Elsie Dinsmore series by Martha Finley, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, and When Will This Cruel War Be Over by Emma Simpson were my top reading choices. Each one had its own twist on the Civil War, but that just made them more fun to read. Martha Finley's books are set before, during, and after the Civil War, which gives the reader a glimpse of how life changed for everyone. The characters in her books focused on a group of wealthy Southerners. Little Women encouraged me to start writing. I had always loved to write short stories, but after reading the book for the first time, I felt the need to write my own novel. Perhaps this had something to do with one of the central characters and her life as a budding author. Emma Simpson's book is a diary of her life as the daughter of a wealthy Southerner. It gave insight into what it was like to be stuck in the middle of the turmoil and yet not be able to do anything about it. It really pushes the reader to evaluate what they would have done in that situation. My process of actually publishing the book took quite a while. Obviously, it began with the writing of the book. This started when I was about 14 and took about 3 years because my papers kept getting lost or destroyed. When I decided to publish my book as a senior project, that's when the rest of the process began. I went through it on my own and fixed as many of the errors as I could in the first edit. After that, I let a couple of others go through and point out some more much-needed edits. Thanks to Emma Oberst, this went faster than I expected. After these first 2 edits, my mentor, Janet Monty,
went through it several times, and she suggested many more edits. During this time, I enlisted the help of Mike and Ricky Carr, who are a sweet older couple and avid Civil War reenactors. They supplied me with books and papers and anything else that I needed, which helped me with my historical accuracy. This added a more realistic feeling to my entire novel, and it started to sound like a real book. Finally, after I had fixed all the previous edits and historical facts, my mentor went through it again. This time, there were hardly any red marks. They felt really good, and we concluded that my editing process was over. And now that the editing was over and done, I could move on to more interesting parts of the process, such as creating the cover. I chose to do this myself because art is another one of my passions, and I thought, why not? I threw around several different ideas before settling on a simple yet beautiful cover. I don't feel any regret about choosing this cover. I feel like it suits the words on the pages inside. Next came purchasing the copyright. At the beginning of my project, I had little to no idea on how to obtain this document, so I had to research that. It was easier than I expected, although I had to wait a little longer than planned to obtain it. In the end, though, it all worked out. Formatting was next. This part took a while as well, but I had anticipated that. At first, I tried formatting my manuscript to look exactly what I had pictured in mind with an elegant, lacy font. This didn't go so well, so I had to try a different style. My mentor suggested a plainer style, and it worked way better. She was right as usual. The rest of the formatting went smoother, and before long, I had my entire book in the correct format and ready to publish. However, when I went to go publish my book, I noticed a small error in my formatting. Somehow, I had missed to format an entire chapter in the middle of my manuscript. I have no idea how that happened. Thankfully, this was easy to fix, though, and I went through the document one more time to check for errors. This was a good idea because I noticed that my previous correction had caused a shift in page numbers. Because of this, my table of contents page was now off. The chapter numbers on the table of contents page that corresponded with the beginning of the chapters was off by only one page. I fixed that, and then I finally published the book. It felt wonderful to be able to finish what I had started several years ago. Why did I choose to use Amazon? Many of you might ask. My main reason is because I wanted to be self-published. This is because I have met and I know several people who are self-published authors. They shared their personal experiences and directed me towards Amazon. Another reason is because it is the publishing platform that I know the most about. It is also listed on several websites as the most popular publishing platform. Think about it. When someone tells you that they bought a book online, what website does your mind automatically think of? Another thing I really like about Amazon is that it is just as easy to publish your manuscript as an ebook as it is to do it as a paperback. While I was filling out forms, I had to decide whether or not to use a pen name or not. After a little consideration, I chose to do so. I then had to decide what I would use as a pen name. The first two parts were easy. I would just use my first and middle initials, but after that I was lost. I enlisted the help of a couple of friends who helped me to eliminate some of my options. I finally chose to use Williams because it felt right. A few weeks after I had made this decision, I remembered that I had actually been born in Williamson County. Perhaps this was why I chose the name to start with. I may never know, and that's all right. Throughout the process of publishing this book, I learned a couple of things. First one is that not everything needs to be perfect, exactly like I planned in my mind. No, this doesn't mean that I don't have to try my best. It simply means that as long as I tried my best, and I know that I tried my best, it will be what it is. I also learned several lessons in patience during this time. Rushing things never turns out well in the big picture. I learned to sit back and be patient and trust God to work out the best. It's not what I expected I would learn from my project. I didn't expect to learn that I needed to trust God more. But, I mean, God uses different ways to teach you what you didn't know you needed to know. Most important of all, however, I learned to not give up on my dreams. Several times, I almost gave up on both myself and my book. But remembering why I started my project in the first place kept me at it. Being able to hold a published copy of my book makes up for all of the troubles I faced. I can look back and say, I persevered and didn't give up. I made my dream come true. Thank you all for listening, and do the judges have any questions?
Thank you. Okay, so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the content of your book. Like, how long is it? Like, what storyline? Like, I'm kind of curious what's going on with that side of things.
Okay, so my book is a historical fiction novel. It's 30 chapters long, and it's basically a story of what it was like to be in the life of it's Southerners who, like, they sympathize with the North, and that wasn't easy. I mean, you had to deal with, like, all the backlash from all those people who disagreed with you, and they're like, we don't want you here anymore. It's like, it wasn't easy to be, it's not easy now to be on the opposite side that everybody else wants you to be on. That it's just, basically it just shares a story of what it's like to have to go through the war, the damages, all the learning experiences that you don't really think about when you think of war. Yeah.
2 questions. Thank you for not talking about blood.
I could if I wanted to.
No, I'm just.
It's war.
I'm just recovered. So, the pen name, explain to me how that works from a copyright standpoint. So, do you own the pen name? And so
Yes.
whatever's written under the pen name belongs to you, and that's how you copyright that?
That's the easy way to say it.
Okay. And then the second question is, having gone through the editing process, I'm assuming you're continuing to write.
Yes.
So
I have
having
other
gone
novels.
through the editing process, how has that changed the way you write now that you've been through that? Are you more careful?
Yes, I have. While I was editing, I got several people pointed out some major errors that I'm just like, I didn't realize that was a problem. And so, I mean, that's obviously, I fixed that. But, like, other than, like, my content, other than the punctuation, I mean, my style hasn't changed very much.
I have a question that kind of goes along with that question. If you're publishing again in the future, how would your experience with this change what you would do? What would you do differently with another book?
I think I would definitely have a bigger variety of people help me with my editing instead of having multiple people, like the same people go through it multiple times, because once you read something a certain number of times, you kind of just start glazing over stuff. That's one of the things that I would choose a wider variety of people to help me. And I think that's about it. I think I liked how my process went. Yes, it was hard, it was complicated, but I mean, nothing you want in life that's of any benefit or like it's a dream, it's like, it's not easy. You have to work for it. And that's what I did.
So do you have another book in the works?
Possibly 3. Or more. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you. It's on.
What an amazing job our seniors have done tonight. So thank you so much for those of you that are still here. I hope you had a wonderful time listening to our seniors' presentations. I don't think I ever introduced myself at the beginning of the night. It's such a family-like environment here. I just assume you all know me. But in case you don't, I am Hannah Barclay. I'm the principal here at the school. And I am so very proud of our seniors. So I'm going to pray for us, and then you can be dismissed, or you can hang out and talk and chat with our seniors. That's totally up to you. So there we go. Father, we want to thank you for being with us throughout this evening. Your presence has been in this place from the start to the end, and we just all want to say thank you. Lord, as we leave this place and our senior class finishes their senior projects, help them to go out there and be a light for others. May they put into practice what they have discussed and learned. Help them to make a difference in this world for the glory of your name. Lord, thank you for bringing us all together tonight to support and love on our seniors. Walk with them, protect them as they begin the next chapter in their lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.